Get a Better Broadcast podcast and voiceover voice. Hello, I'm Peter Stewart. Slightly long one today, so let's get straight to it. We're talking about the narrator's various points of view. So, as we mentioned yesterday, the narrator could be the word used for the person telling the story as written by the author. Yeah, the person whose viewpoint you are vocalizing. One of the actual characters could be the narrator of the story. And the narrator is also you, the person who is recording the story as well. So, first of all, let's understand who you, the narrator, are in the story. That is, as I just mentioned there, whose point of view is the story told from. So, there could be first person point of view, there could be second person point of view, and there could be three different third person points of view. Now don't worry, that sounds quite daunting, but I'm going to take you by the hand and lead you through, with some examples, the different points of view. And it's interesting and useful to know this because it will affect how you actually read the text because of your intonation and your style. Are you reading it as you, the narrator, sitting in a booth? Or are you reading it as though you're one of the characters? And if so, how involved are you as a character in the story? Yeah? Are you standing from the sidelines and just watching what is developing? Or are you the main person in the story? How much do you know about what is happening and what's going to happen as a narrator? Because, as you can tell, if you know how that story is going to develop, because it's a kind of retrospective look, and you are right in the middle of the action, you're going to be delivering that audiobook in a much more different kind of tone and sense of understanding of what is unfolding than if you're completely detached and you're only watching it as a story arc develop minute by minute. Okay, let's go through these then. The first person point of view. First person point of view. When you say, this is an example, when you say as a narrator, I or we, it's how we speak in real life. I'm going to sit down and write myself a letter. Yeah, that's my first person point of view. I'm going to go to the park. We are going to go on holiday to San Francisco. Yeah, it's a more personal point of view. It's the point of view that's used in things like memoirs, also romance stories very often, and young adult fiction. Particularly in romance, because of course it's much more involving to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is what they did to me, this is how I touched them back, yeah, this is how I felt. But it can suffer from feeling a little bit too introspective because of that. I was furious as I tore at the thick undergrowth with my cane. How dare she speak to me in that way? Yeah, that's a sense of first person point of view. You're only able to tell the story from your point of view, your own feelings, your own thoughts, what is going through your mind at that time, what you are doing. You've got no insight into any of the other characters. So obviously that makes it quite involved. Could make it quite a heavy read as well, because you've really got to get into that character. That's the first person point of view. The second person point of view, this is when you use you. So it's the unspoken me talking to you. It's actually rarely used in novels, but it is in games. Let me give you an example. You come across a panel with hieroglyphics scrawled on it and a lever on either side. Which one will you pull? Yeah, you've come across that kind of sense and tone and point of view in a game. And it's also used in non-fiction as well. Yeah, when someone's giving you advice, when the author is giving you advice, this is what you should do, help books and so on. Okay, so first and second. So hopefully this is really interesting. Let's look at third person point of view. Here we go. The third person point of view. So we've had I, we've had you. Third person is she, he, they, and it. That's what you use in those kind of situations. The third person, as I mentioned a few moments ago, is actually broken down to three other sections. Now, don't worry about this. Okay, going to be taking you through with some examples, each of these just a couple of seconds long when I lead you through the examples. And at the end of it, before we finish today, I'll tell you which points of view are more likely to be used in the books, the audio books that you come across. Okay, so third person, omniscient. Omniscient. So omniscient is the word that we might give to a god or a spirit or something like that. Everywhere, all-knowing, all-seeing, omniscient. Yeah. And third person omniscient is when the narrator knows everything. So you, voicing it up, and the character you're playing in the book, you know everything. What do I mean by that? You know the thoughts and feelings of all of the characters. So if you've ever read War and Peace, or it's very often used in epic fantasy books as well. It's less common today, but let me give you an example. Here we go. Neither Marsha nor Mohammed knew what was going to happen next, that the gunman was already watching them, determined to stop their plan, and that he would be successful. So, the narrator knows everything. The narrator knows what they're thinking, and also the narrator knows what is going to happen next. It's not used very much, as you can probably determine from that style. Not something you often come across in novels. Okay. Number 2 of 3, third person limited. Now, this is when the narrator only knows the thoughts of one person. This is really common, as you'll see from an example. So think of the Harry Potter series. It's all told, isn't it, from Harry's perspective and with knowledge of his motivations. But we don't know what is going through the minds of Ron and Hermione, for example. Let me give you an example. Not from the book, copyright reasons. Let's come up with another example. Natalie knew that she wanted to feel this way forever. Okay, so we know what Natalie is thinking, but we don't know what other people are thinking. But we're not Natalie ourselves. Okay, so it's a really common perspective in romance again, thriller, epic fantasy, young adult fiction again. Finally, third person multiple. It's a bit like what we've just mentioned, third person limited. But this is when the author switches the perspective between scenes or chapters. It's not very common, but you will recognise it, I'm sure, from films and novels when I tell you a bit more about it, as I'm about to over the next few seconds. So this is when the story may be told from the point of view of maybe the murderer in one chapter, the victim in another, the detective's point of view in the third. Yeah, and then it's up to you as the reader to put all that information together, see it from the different perspectives, work out who did what and why. Okay, the narrator, you as the reader, still impartial. Yeah, because the chapter is not in the first person point of view. It's just that the information is being given from another vantage point. But it can be awkward for the listener to follow the regular changes through the story. Oh, who am I now? Oh, yeah, I'm the murderer. Right, okay, I kind of see that now. Think of Game of Thrones. So George R.R. Martin uses that technique in the Game of Thrones series of books. Yeah. Usually, the narrator tells a story from, in order of popularity, the view of one of the third person perspectives that I've just finished talking about, and then the first, and then the second point of view. All of this in our show notes if you want to go back and remind yourself. And it's really important to have a passing knowledge of all this because it tells you how much insight you'll have about what is actually going on in the story. For example, in first person, you as the narrator won't know what someone else is thinking or their motivations. In third person limited, you may only be able to offer the insight for the listener into one character's thoughts and feelings. Okay. I've got a really good example in the show notes today, so check out that. It's one of my favourite films. It's one of the biggest films of all time, and you'll be able to see a really good example of what I mean by narration and the different points of view and the narrative style. That's as Get a Better Broadcast podcast and Voice Over Voice continues in the show notes and also tomorrow. What is the audiobook narrator's own character? Not the person's point of view that you're reading, but you in the booth tomorrow as the show continues. From London, I'm Peter Stewart.